And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your valuable time with the Adapt 2030 channel. London in snow. The news is buzzing about it, but it was nothing like 1962-63. Record electricity prices striking once again, UK all-time high. But as we look at power generation from renewables, there's not going to be enough wind or solar heading into high demand time. Scandinavian countries rocking to near highs. U.S. around Christmas. Do I see 1 degree Fahrenheit in East Tennessee? I do. La Nina. And now we're starting to see the cold blob in the southern Atlantic. Vivid clouds. And I guess it's all perspective. First heat wave of Australian summer, 46 degrees Celsius. Yet none of those break 40 in the highs on yellows. So perhaps we need to think of new ways to produce electricity moving forward. Decentralized is best. I want to start you off here. These are some photos that, well, it looks like the day after tomorrow, right over England, Scotland, Wales. So prophetic, that movie. This was off Terra Modis. Scotland, Wales, Snowdonia. Yeah, they were all talking about how it looked like the day after tomorrow. Also, intriguing images here. NASA Worldview, that's an enormous amount of white cover in the Highlands. Scotland, deep freeze, 15 degrees below 0 Celsius. And way down south in London, several inches in the street that I see there. Beautiful, but not very long lasting, melted off a few days later. But seeing snow this deep, a rarity for most, unless you're older. And if you go back to 1962, 63, you see something that's very different than the news-making headlines that we just saw. This would definitely have a little bit of extra time involved in your day to move from point A to point B now, wouldn't it? Staying on energy prices here in the UK, day ahead. Red dot to the right, the highest ever recorded. Remember a few months back talking about the highest ever recorded, denting in and absolutely slamming economic activity across the UK. EPEX showing it 647 pounds per megawatt. And get this one, the evening peak load at 2,000 British pounds per megawatt. Things close at that point. You just literally can't afford to run your businesses. And add insult to injury, Britain is now at risk of becoming a country that cannot feed itself. They're looking for urgent solutions. Sleepwalking into a supply crisis, food supply crisis that is, along with energy. National Farmers Union warning. So this seems to be the theme of the planet. Not enough food, not enough energy, everything rocketing to a record high, new prices, and we're just getting into 2023. And by all accounts and all forecasts, those planned, some speculated, that will be the theme of 2023. Unaffordability of every life cost, dailies, weeklies, your homes, your cars, your fuels, your foods. You ready for that? It's time to take a deep breath at the end of the year here. Deutsche Bank, Citi, and Morgan Stanley are all forecasting another 25% plunge in the stock market. The only break in inflation is with a recession. Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki said, "I believe the economy is in the biggest bubble in history." Kiyosaki bought more gold, predicting $3,000 an ounce in a year. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold, and you may qualify for the no fee for life IRA. On qualifying rollovers, give them a call, 888-546-7020. Tell them Adapt 2030 sent you. And now on with the video. So where does our food come from? This was off Zero Hedge and it was quite the infographic. Can't really zoom it too much for you here, but there's a full list of base foods or tradable commodities that come from individual nations, and that in turn of which is the lion's share of world production. But one thing to keep in mind, it seems like the supply chains are the things that are running away on here that are not delivering goods to point B from point A. Everything's going to come more regional or localized as we move forward. And speaking of which, Nordic countries already had exceptionally high food prices because they were at the end of the line, if you will, for supply chains moving north in the hemisphere. Nord Pool, just a sliver below. Economic crushing activity several months ago, following the same trajectory. So where does that leave us now with power production across Europe? Well, they're deindustrializing. They're just simply not enough. Let's take a look at the power makeup mix from the biomass to the natural gas to the offshore wind and the solar PV. Now, if you look at where it says December 2019, directly below there, what do you see? A huge valley, a drop-off, no solar. So then, obviously, the amount of power generation is going to decrease. But let's keep in mind, that blue for the wind and that teal for the natural gas is also out of there. Bye-bye. And now we're into low wind. So what does that mean for power generation? If you're going to combine those three, that's a trifecta of nastiness right there. Let's bring it a little more granular. What you're looking at are the red spikes are the excess wind power generated. Blue are wind power lows. So if you start all the way on the right side of the chart, that'll bring us into approximately the end of November into December. And as we progress, you're going to have to swing over to the other side of the chart, left side this time. That'll be the January. Normally be excess wind power during January, February. But with the low wind we just saw, you're going to have to subtract that. So now take a look at this chart once more and see where this leaves us. Subtract the natural gas, subtract the wind, subtract solar. And you'll understand why natural gas demand in Europe has fallen. They call that demand destruction. It just became so expensive, unaffordable. And again, that brings us right back to the theme of 2023 coming. If it's already like this, what do you think it'll be like in January, February when peak demand comes in for the winter, when those persons need to heat their homes, their businesses, keep the lights on? Well, one thing I can say for sure is that factories will shut during this time, predominantly across Europe and the EU zone. So as we march headlong into deindustrialization of Europe, the factories are only going to be able to run in spring and fall, as it looks from this profile so far. Now, things could change. I know they could. But the demand for heating for citizens to keep their homes warm so they don't go to the streets is going to be paramount for these governments. So you're going to watch the natural gas and the electrical that is generated be diverted over into the apartment buildings, the homes, etc. There'll be very little left for any kind of business. So you'll probably go through these ebbs and flows of peaks in the spring when industrial production will ramp up again, but then it will need to decrease during summer when there's an enormous amount of demand for cooling in the middle of the summer. And then we come back into these off seasons where nice and cool temperatures in the fall, and then we'll revert back into when we come into cooler temperatures and people demand for heat. So it's just going to be this up and down, up and down, up and down, sawtooth pattern of economic activity across the Eurozone. And since we are in a connected world of finance, doesn't bode well unless you want to bring in a different form of exchangeables, central bank digital currencies, this sort of thing, BRICS, gold-backed monetary fund, whatever that will take shape and form. But we are at the end of the world that you knew. As we march forward through this winter, it's all going to change, all of it. So get ready for that. We are emerging into and exiting out of and into a new world, literally a new world. And bringing it up here close to Christmas temperatures across the EU. Just wanted to drop this one in here. What's that? It's the 27th. Extreme cold all the way down into Spain and Portugal. Wow, get ready for demand on the electric side for that. Now, there are different ways that we could generate electricity locally. This is a new invention that has suddenly made the rounds, and I approve of this. Look at this. Archimedes screw spiral blades generating power. I know it's not a lot, but you can put thousands of those down a stream and produce some. It's a start. Now, looking over at La Nina, which is supposed to taper off and move into more of an El Nino phase, hopefully alleviating the drought in Argentina so they can produce more wheat. But at the same time, on the inverse, there's a cold blob emerging in the South Atlantic that's not normally there. So what's happening with the oceans now? This is the third consecutive La Nina, strongest ever recorded. If it would have gone to the fourth, that would have been it. They have never seen a fourth La Nina. Seems it is tapering off, but look at the cold blob in the southern Atlantic, right over the magnetic anomaly in the South Atlantic also. Isn't that interesting? Now, staying in the southern hemisphere, Australia heading into summer, look at this, first heat wave pushing the mercury to 46 degrees Celsius. But then I encourage you to look at all the temperatures. Those are the ones that are in yellow, and I do not even see one that's up into the 40s. So perhaps we could use all that energy from the gas lit down there and transfer that over to Europe. What do you think? Now over to the US super freeze right around Christmas, day after Christmas. You have to look at this temperature profile, and as it continues out, it keeps marching into January. But one thing, since I live in East Tennessee, I thought, okay, really rarely ever see this cold below normal temperatures off of this type of temperature delta. And looking at the 2-meter ground air temperatures in Fahrenheit, that means 6 feet above the ground, which really isn't ground temperatures because ground temperature is on the ground where the frost is. 1 degree. And even I saw the long-term weather forecast out here for East Tennessee. They're looking at around 5 degrees Fahrenheit for the lows several days in a row, and then it'll finally creep up to 11 and possibly even 12 degrees Fahrenheit. So go over at clouds in Kentucky. No filter, except your imagination, and perhaps your wondering of how clouds like this form after intense storm fronts. Because it is going to be perception the way that we do view the world from this point forward. And is this a tree? Is it a cloud? How do you see the world in front of us is more the question. Because your perception of reality and how you're going to be able to bend and move through these changes, it's good to have information to know where, the world's being taken to, where we sit now, what types of natural changes, and then we have political changes, economic changes, supply chain changes. Everything is in flux at the moment. It's all moving, bending, morphing. Electromagnetic changes off of the sun as well to contend with as we move into January, February. Look for larger earthquakes, larger volcanic eruptions. The whole world as we know it, the entire society and civilization is in a change phase. Happens once every 80 years. And then if you combine those cycles of 5, you get a 400-year cycle. And if you combine those into cycles of 5, a 2,000-year cycle. And you can go up and up and up into, tens of thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years. But the way I'm looking at it, definitely something is in play. And again, it's perception. You can look at a barren tree, or you can look at a cloud behind it and make a cloud tree. Whatever, the way you see it is the way it is going to be. I do appreciate you watching. Hope you got something out of the video. If you're looking for storable foods, my Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030. 3-month emergency food supply, 25-year shelf life. Give yourself the peace of mind knowing you have storable foods so you can avoid some of the chaos. And also, join myself and Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and we also broadcast out on 8 different streaming platforms, so you can choose the one you're most familiar with. And join the conversation. We do read the comments through there as the night goes on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.